Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome, everyone, to Sports Spectrum. I'm Jason Romano. Great to have you joining us today here on the program. As always, we want to encourage you to subscribe to this podcast on whatever app you're listening to so that you never miss an episode, and go back, listen to the 300 plus, almost 400 plus interviews that we've done in the last 2.5 years here on Sports Spectrum with our podcast, and check out our website, sportspectrum.com. We are posting content every single day, different articles, daily devotionals, this podcast. It's all over at our website, sportspectrum.com. And you can also, while you're there, click that subscribe button for $18. You get our magazine, a quarterly magazine, $18. What a great deal for an awesome magazine. Our fall issue is out now. Check it out over at sportspectrum.com. Really excited to have Steve Burdick on the show today as our guest. He is the executive director of College Golf Fellowship. Now, Steve is ministering to golfers both on the college level and on the PGA Tour level, the professional tour level. But Steve's a golfer himself. He was a former Stanford All-American golfer from 1991 to 1995, and he helped Stanford win the national championship in 1994. While he was there, he was a student leader with Athletes in Action, and his former teammates in college include PGA Tour players Casey Martin, Notah Begay, and yes, Tiger Woods. Steve explored the pro golf world for a couple years and then went into full-time ministry, joining the College Golf Fellowship in 2001. He's also helped plant 2 churches in the Sacramento area. And on this episode, we talked to Steve about faith in golf, but not just the faith of the players that he's ministering to, but the story of faith that Steve has lived in his own life. It's a great story. He tells it very well. I think you'll love hearing the journey, hearing the story. College Golf Fellowship Executive Director Steve Burdick here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Steve, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's good to talk to you, Steve. I'm glad we got connected. Let's start right away, I guess, with the role that you have. College Golf Fellowship. For those listening that don't know what that is or what that entails, tell us about it.
Yeah, we are a ministry that comes alongside college golfers and professional golfers and just walks with them through life and encouraging them to understand what a relationship with Jesus is all about. And so we're similar to other campus and sports ministries like FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Athletes in Action, but we work predominantly with just the golfers because typically golfers are not on campus very often. And so we actually came up as a ministry to reach a group of people that wasn't being reached by any other ministry. And so what we do is we come to the actual college golf tournaments, we build relationships with the coaches and the players, and then we introduce them to what a relationship with Jesus is. And for those who are interested, we spend more time discipling them and helping them reach out to their teammates. And then we host retreats, partnering with a lot of the PGA Tour golfers who have a faith background. And what we do is we'll have retreats at some of the PGA Tour players' houses like Zach Johnson or Ben Crane, Davis Love III, Aaron Baddeley. And so we'll spend 2 or 3, 4 days on their houses. And so we'll bring a lot of guys in who maybe have never had a faith background, gone to church, but they're interested enough to say, hey, I'll hang out with these PGA Tour guys. And through that process, we'll bring in a pastor or teacher to speak in the morning, the evening, play golf during the day. And again, just let them know what the Christian life is all about and get them exposed to what the good news of the gospel is. So that's really the heartbeat of who we are and what we enjoy doing.
So take us through the college side of it and how you minister to those college golfers, and then the PGA Tour pros. You know, that life is a crazy life for many of them, especially if you're on the top level pro tour of being able to stay connected with the Lord. You're traveling to a different place every week. So what does that look like as far as College Golf Fellowship partaking in that? What does that look like, I guess, from college and then from the PGA Tour?
So basically, again, college golfers and pro golfers, they travel a lot. College golfers, I think, miss more school than any other college sports program. And so what we do is we'll go to the actual tournament sites. And so there may be 15, 20 schools playing at a tournament. And so we'll offer a chapel service, a Bible study after the practice round, usually on a Sunday evening. They're traveling obviously over the weekend, so they're not able to go to a church service. So we provide that for them while they're on the road. And so while we're out there, we'll also meet with teams, individuals, set up appointments, and just, like I said, come alongside these guys, build a relationship, earn the right to be heard, and then just really help these guys grow in their faith background. And similar on the PGA Tour, we have staff who travel with the PGA Tour, and so they are leading the PGA Tour Fellowship each week. So on a Tuesday evening is when the PGA Tour Fellowship takes place. Again, these tour players are on the road and they're not able to go to church or get connected in a local Christian community. And so really that PGA Tour Fellowship becomes their Christian community. And so we, again, lead the Bible studies out there, help them get connected, disciple the guys. And so that's really what it's all about.
You said the words, earn the right to be heard. Can you kind of expand on what you mean by that when you say, as you go and minister, that you're earning the right to be heard?
Yeah, that's a phrase that Youth for Christ and Young Life Ministries used a lot. And basically, we want to build a relationship with these guys so that they understand that we care for them and that we love them and that really we want what's best for them. And we believe full life, eternal life is found in a relationship with Jesus. So as we build that relationship and show the love of Christ to them, we have the opportunity then to share the truth of the gospel that we have found in the scriptures. And so that's really what we're trying to do.
That's good. Steve Burdick is our guest here on Sports Spectrum. So tell us about your faith journey. I want to talk about your golf journey as well, because it's a fascinating one, having played golf at Stanford. And I think those two actually might intersect a little bit. So tell us about your faith journey and where that began.
Yeah, I grew up outside of Sacramento, California, and I played a lot of sports growing up. Golf quickly became the sport that I had probably the most success with at a young age, and ended up getting offered a golf scholarship to Stanford when I was a junior in high school. And really at that point, I would have called myself a Christian. I really didn't understand really what a genuine, authentic relationship with Jesus was, but I went to church on Christmas and Easter and a few Sundays in between and thought, okay, I'm a Christian because I'm a good moral person. And that was kind of the extent of it. And I had a youth pastor at the church that I did attend sporadically who took me out to lunch one day and he asked me a question that really changed the course of my life. He said, Steve, if all of your success with golf, your scholarship to Stanford, if all of this success in the world's eyes was taken away, would you still be content with your life? And that rocked my world. And I looked him right in the eyes and I saw this 25-year-old youth pastor who had more peace and contentment than I had. And I was honest with him. And I said, no, my whole identity, my whole self-worth was built on being really good at whatever I was doing. Was it with my grades or school or golf or whatever it was? And he said, if you want to find out what true contentment is in this world, why don't we start meeting and I'll show you what the Bible has to say. And through that course of the next several weeks and months, he helped me really understand what Jesus did, that he came into this world, he lived the perfect life that we couldn't live, and he died a death that really paid the penalty for my sins. And by placing my trust in him, I could enter into a relationship with him and find the peace and contentment that I was looking for and the eternal life that really we're all longing for. And so that's when I really became a Christian, was my senior year in high school. And that youth pastor discipled me and really built a firm foundation before I went away to school at Stanford. And then at Stanford, I got involved with some great campus ministries there, Athletes in Action being one of them, and continued to be discipled by the staff at Stanford. And really got to see God use me even in some cool opportunities as I grew in my golf and grew in my faith. God opened up some doors and gave me a platform to really share my faith with other people, and really started giving me a heart for ministry and what that looked like, and kind of the ironic thing of how God works. And I shouldn't say it's ironic, it's the sovereignty of God. But my senior year, after being an All-American, we won the national championship. Tiger Woods comes in senior year. We have 4 returning All-Americans off our national championship team. And all of a sudden we're touted as the best golf team ever. And all the newspaper articles are written about us and blah, blah, blah. And make a long story short, my golf game did go south into my senior year. And it got so bad that my coach sat me down in his office right before the national championships and said, Steve, I'm so sorry. You've been such an integral part of this team for 4 years, but you're just not playing well enough, and I've got to bench you. And I can't tell you how hard that was. And to walk out of that office really humbled and just really not knowing what to do. All I did know for sure was there was a God who loved me, and I drove up into the hills behind the Stanford campus and pulled out my Bible and went back to some of the key verses that I had read and memorized over the years, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 being one of them. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. And so I didn't know what the future held at that point, but I knew God held it, and I just needed to learn to trust him. And I realized that, going back to that question that my youth pastor had asked me my senior year in high school, would I still be content if all this was taken away? And I thought, yeah, of course. I dealt with that 4 years ago, but now I was having to live it out. And I think that changed everything. And I remember praying, sitting in my car and literally saying, Lord, why this? Why now? I thought I was going to be the PGA Tour player that was a Christian that got to give God glory through victory. And here I was going through, a lot of struggles and defeat. And he just kind of whispered in my ear. It wasn't audible. It was just kind of a peace that he gave me. It was just trust me. I've got this handled. And little did I know he was preparing me for life of full-time ministry to college and pro golfers. And so I get to share that journey with these young men and really encourage them, whether they've had a lot of success and aren't finding fulfillment in that, or going through the struggles of what, playing sports and struggling through the ups and downs of that, and be able to come alongside him and remind him there is a God who loves them unconditionally and wants to walk with him through both victory and defeat.
Yeah, that's such a good story. There's so much to unpack. You actually said the words long story short, but we have a podcast, so we can go a little longer with it. So the good thing is I want to unpack a little bit that Stanford time with you. So take us through the golf successes that you were having. I know you won a national championship in 1994. I mentioned in the intro that you were a All-American golfer. So you hear that, and you kind of mentioned the valleys of that time as well in 95 and losing your spot. So take us through some of the successes and what it was like to experience that golfing with Stanford.
Yeah, you bet. I came in as a freshman, and Stanford obviously was a pretty highly ranked team at the time. And so I was a pretty highly ranked junior golfer, and to come play on a team like that was kind of a dream come true to be able to play at a school like Stanford, who had a great, educational background as well as a great golf program. And so I came in there as a freshman and kind of expected to just come in and play. And I didn't play great my freshman year. Took me a few tournaments before I finally got into the lineup. And then once I got in the lineup, I didn't miss a tournament until that senior year. And I got to play with the likes of Notah Begay, who was the first Native American golfer to ever win on the PGA Tour. He was a year older than me, and a guy named Casey Martin, who was the guy who sued the PGA Tour to get to use a golf cart. So it was kind of interesting to see some of these guys and big names and the success that they've had throughout the golfing world. And so here I was coming in and jumped into the lineup finally about partway through the fall of my freshman year. And we went to the national championships my freshman year and finished ninth. So, we played great. Notah Begay shot 64 in the third round. And, it was just a lot of fun to see how good these golfers were. And at that time, I didn't know how good I could be. And then my sophomore year, I came back and we got wind that this guy named Tiger Woods was going to be potentially coming to Stanford. And so he obviously was the all-world recruit. Even as a junior golfer, everybody knew who he was. And of course, every college golf team wanted him on their team. Yeah. And so if Casey and Notah had just played 4 straight years and not redshirted, they wouldn't have had a chance to play with him. So when they got word that Tiger may come to Stanford, they decided to redshirt after their sophomore year. So I came in my sophomore year. Those two guys redshirted. So I all of a sudden was thrown into the number 1 player on the team. Which I think really helps me understand what my potential was. And right out of the chute, I won my first tournament in Washington, and again, it kind of surprised myself and surprised my coach. And all of a sudden, I started to maybe gain some confidence. And golf is such a game of confidence. And I went on to win another tournament, and I qualified for nationals as an individual that year. Finished third at regionals, and just had a great year. That was my All-American year. I was a third-team All-American that year. And it was, just one of those things that you kind of go, wow, I never thought that was possible. And so then my junior year is when Casey Martin and Notah Begay came off of their redshirt year. And so now all of a sudden we've got 3 returning All-Americans on that team. And this is still the year before Tiger was a freshman. So this is junior year. And so we had a great year that year. We all played pretty solidly all year long. We were ranked in the top 10, but we weren't the best team in the country by far. Right. And we came to the national championships in McKinney, Texas at a course called Stonebridge. And we had played that same course in the fall. It was just brutal. We played terribly. The wind blew about 30 miles an hour. We're not used to playing in wind out in California. And so all the southern teams teams, the Texas teams, dominated. And so we were like, bummer, we're going to have to play this course for national championships. And all of a sudden we get out there, the wind stopped blowing, and we just played unbelievable. We kind of upset the best teams in the country that year. Texas, who had Justin Leonard at the time, some other teams, Georgia Tech had Stuart Sink, and all of a sudden, Notah Begay shoots 62 in the second round. We had a guy on our team, our number 4 man, Will Yanagisawa, shoots 64 in the final round. I played really solidly most of the I shot 70, 70, 71, and then I had a bad last round, got thrown out because in college golf, you count 4 out of your best 5 scores. But we ended up winning by 3 strokes over Texas and won the national championship. And so I always laugh and joke with people. I said, Tiger didn't help us out at all because we won the national championships before Tiger got there, and he came in and we lost in the playoffs.
Yeah, who's this guy? He doesn't even help us.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's awesome.
That was quite a year.
So the next year when Tiger arrives and you're there and you see this young freshman kid come in, obviously it's easy to look back now and see how amazingly awesome his career has been, and watching him do what he did this year was a really neat thing at the Masters. But at that time for you're seeing a guy come in, and yet you talked about it for a little bit. It's not the highest of highs. It's actually in probably many ways in college, the lowest of lows for you. So take us through getting that message, I guess, that you're not going to be joining the team and going into that championship to defend it, and then how you were able to stay strong in your faith and trust during that, or maybe you weren't, because that's a young age. That's a very impressionable time in a person's life in their early 20s. Take us through that.
Yeah. In fact, when Tiger came in, everybody asks the question, was he really as good as everybody said he was? And he was. I played some junior tournaments against him growing up. Yeah. Obviously, he was the best player in the world at a young age. In fact, I met him when he was 13 and I was 15, and we both qualified for this big national tournament out of California. And I had never heard of this kid. He was this 13-year-old kid that qualified for this big national tournament that I qualified for. And I was excited as a 15-year-old to go back to Texarkana, Arkansas. And so I traveled back there with him and played a couple practice rounds. I'm like, wow, he's really good. And not only was he really good, he finished second at that tournament as a 13-year-old competing against 17-year-olds. I finished 25th. I thought I was playing pretty well. And here's this 13-year-old that just waxed me. And so obviously that's my first time I had ever heard of him. And then obviously watched his ranks. And he went on to win 3 U.S. junior amateurs, and then he won his first U.S. amateur the summer before he came into Stanford. And so here he was coming off winning the U.S. amateur at Sawgrass, which was the famous course where they have the Tour Championship. And so the famous putt on the 17th hole, the Island Green, he makes and goes on to win that. So he had just an incredible pedigree coming into Stanford. And so it was kind of funny because when he showed up at Stanford, of course, we still had 4 returning All-Americans from the previous year, and Notah Begay, who was really one of the strongest willed people that I've ever known. And he looked Tiger right in the eyes and he goes, Tiger, I don't care how good you are. You're still going to be a typical freshman. You're going to carry our luggage to the airport and you're going to sleep on the rollaway bed. And so Tiger laughed and he said, yeah, I'll do that under one condition. When I win my first tournament, then I'm not going to do it anymore. And we're like, yeah, that's pretty fair. We can go with that. So of course we go out to New Mexico at the first tournament of the year in September. And what does Tiger do? He wins his first tournament right out of the chute. So he quickly proved to everybody he was the best. But I can say he honestly carried my luggage at the airport in between signing autographs as people were coming up to him and saying, you're Tiger Woods, right? Can I get your autograph? And so, of course, you just had that kind of mystique about who he was. And literally at every single college golf tournament, he had a press conference set up. That's how good he was. There was never press conferences at college golf tournaments until Tiger showed up. And so, we got to watch him kind of do that. So that's kind of how that year kicked off was him, kind of showing how good he really was. And he went on to win his second tournament and his 4th tournament in a row. So he won 6 times his freshman year. So not too bad as a freshman.
No, that's pretty good. But then for you, it doesn't go as well, right?
It doesn't go as well. So we had actually a pretty good fall semester because in college golf, you have a fall semester of golf, and then you take a couple months off, and then you have spring, and then the conference championships and the NCAAs are in the spring. And so really I played well in the fall. Our team dominated. I think we pretty much won every tournament. We were ranked number 1 in the country, and we had it going on. And then took a couple months off during the winter, and I came back after that. And, you just kind of feel like the first couple tournaments are rust. You're just kind of getting the rust off and working on your game. I didn't play great, but I wasn't at that point really worried about what was happening. But all of a sudden, 3-4 tournaments in the road, I'm all of a sudden shooting scores I hadn't shot since I was, in high school. And all of a sudden it's getting worse. And I'm going, what is going on? And if anybody's played golf or any sport at that level, it's, a lot of it's mental. A lot of it's just, your mental approach. And when you start losing confidence and you start second guessing yourself and you're hitting shots that you're not used to hitting and trying to figure it all out and listening to different swing instructors and trying to get help. And all of a sudden it's just spiraling worse and worse. And so that's when it just becomes like, oh my gosh, what's happening here? And everybody's trying to help Steve. What's wrong with Steve? I was literally probably one of the straightest hitters on the team. I wasn't super long. I mean, Tiger and Notah and Casey Martin, they were all longer hitters, but I didn't miss fairways. I hit a lot of greens in regulation. And so kind of that's where I really excelled, was just in my ball striking. And all of a sudden I couldn't hit fairways anymore. And so then I'm asking the Lord, like, God, what's going on? And really going through that kind of character development time and really trying to say, okay, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you. And when it got so bad that my coach had to bench me, that's where I think, like you said, as a 21-year-old kid, senior in college, having to wrestle with those kind of doubts and really self-confidence issues and identity issues. Because I think it's so easy to get your whole identity wrapped up in that golf score. And I think that's what, makes golf so different, is that, if you're playing basketball or football, if you're not shooting well, you can play defense or you can, rebound or whatever it is. But in golf, you post a score every day, and that score oftentimes define who you are. And so all of a sudden that score is getting posted every day and it's way higher than what I'm used to shooting. And all of a sudden, my core is getting rocked. And yet again, when I drove into those hills behind the Stanford campus and really just kind of bore my soul before the Lord and just prayed and said, Lord, why is this happening? What's going on here? I just don't get it. I just wasn't what I had planned. But I think true peace and contentment comes, and this is what the Lord reminded me of, when I trust God's plans as being better than my own plans. And I think that we all, can learn from that, because it's so easy to say, this is what I've got planned for my life, Lord, will you bless it? Instead of letting, Lord, I trust you no matter what your plans are for my life. If they're different than what I have planned, help me just to walk through that faithfully. And so that's really what the Lord taught me through that time. And again, I didn't know what the future held. I still wanted to play professional golf. I played golf my entire life. I still, had a lot of supporters. I had sponsors even that wanted to support me when I turned pro after I graduated. And so I had still opportunities to keep playing golf. And I did for 2 years and traveled around playing mini tours, tried to qualify for the PGA Tour. Obviously didn't make it out there, but still, just even through those ups and downs, a lot of character development, just being humbled, having to trust God, walking through just some difficult times. It was really one of the lowest points in my life of just trying to get my golf game back and ultimately really letting go of the control. I think that was what was really hard. And through that time, I was volunteering for a high school ministry and discipling some young men who were eager to grow in their faith and getting to share my faith through that process. And that's when the Lord really started working in my heart of saying, maybe the Lord's calling me to something different. And again, that was a scary time to really even think about that, because I thought golf was all I knew. That's all I was ever going to do. And all of a sudden, my passion started changing. I started to get more excited to share the gospel and the hope of Christ with people and lead Bible studies. And that became more exciting to me than really playing in golf tournaments and trying to win golf tournaments. And so that's when I knew there was something going on, because the Lord was literally changing my desires at that point.
Do people think you were crazy, though, at that point, when they're looking at you and say, what are you talking about? You're one of these top golfers.
Yeah, no question about it. My dad was a huge, part of that process. He was kind of a swing coach growing up, and my dad wasn't a believer growing up. He came to Christ later in life. And so, it was interesting as I would process with him. In fact, this is kind of a cool story. I think it really kind of speaks to what the Lord was doing. But, he wanted me to keep pursuing golf and wanted me to keep, doing that, because he's like, hey, the Lord's opened up these doors for you. You have sponsors. Why wouldn't you keep doing this? And I was down in Palm Springs after a pretty tough tournament. And I'll never forget this day. My dad kind of looked at me, and he wasn't a really deep guy, but he had grown in his faith over the last 7 years. He almost died of a heart attack. And the Lord kind of gave him a second chance at life. And I think that's when the Lord opened up his eyes to what a relationship with him was all about. And so he looked at me and he said, Steve, I now know why God gave me these last 7 years. He's given me a second chance at life. And he's taught me how to love my family the way I should have been doing it the whole time. And he's also taught me the importance of sharing our faith with other people. And I think that was the moment when it really became real to me. Like, my dad gets this, and he's almost given me a blessing to say, hey, whatever you decide, I understand. And really the crazy thing about that story is 2 weeks later, my dad got pneumonia and passed away 4 days after that. And so really it was a defining moment in my life that the Lord gave me that moment with my dad playing golf to really release me to say, you know what, go do what the Lord's calling you to do. And so it was a hard time, again, going through the loss of my father, as a 23-year-old kid. But
Sure.
I think the Lord gave me that as an opportunity to say, you know what, life is short. We don't know how many years we're going to have on this earth, and we want to use every single moment that we have for eternal purposes. And I think that's when the Lord started saying, yeah, I think you're ready to leave golf and move in a different direction. And so I took 6 months off of golf after my dad passed away. And the Lord at that point said, you know what, you can move on. And so that's where I decided to go into ministry and kind of never looked back since.
Yeah, Steve, this is good stuff here. As you gone into ministry and as you began to work with these golfers and see the struggles that they have, both pro and college, and you're able to share your story. You're able to share the story that you just shared about your dad, which is powerful. You're able to share the story of your senior year at Stanford. Take us sort of to today, fast forwarding the last few years, we'll say, and being able to watch and see your story help others and how your journey, your experiences has been able to help others. Because I have to imagine that these golfers today are experiencing the same struggles and issues that you experienced 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is a blessing. I mean, I worked at a church for 2 years before I came on staff with College Golf Fellowship. And when I was working at that church, I was really praying and saying, Lord, I played golf for 20 years and now I'm a youth pastor. And I'm okay with that, but is there a way to merge the worlds of golf and ministry together? And the executive director of College Golf Fellowship at that time, a guy named Rick Massengale, who played on the PGA Tour back in the 70s. And I had run into him a couple times because CGF was just a small little ministry and they only had one staff out in Texas at the time. And an intern. And so I came in contact with him a few times when I was traveling during college golf. I'm like, wow, golf ministry, this is awesome. But, again, because it was so small and just didn't have connections on the West Coast, I really didn't see him much. And that guy called me up and he said, hey, we're looking to expand our ministry. I heard you're in ministry now. Would you be interested in helping us develop our ministry on the West Coast? And I said, let me pray about that. Sure. It didn't take long to realize that God was already answering my prayer and allowing me to use the gifts and talents that I've had with golf to merge it into a passionate heart to share the hope of Christ with others. And so really, since I came on staff almost 19 years ago, it's been an amazing journey to come alongside these guys, like you said, who are struggling with the same things. And you just never know when the Lord's going to be working in a person's heart. But when you're available, and like I said before, when you've earned the right to be heard, and these guys, maybe they're not super interested in faith the first time I meet them, but when their golf game goes south, or when their parents get divorced, or when their girlfriend breaks up with them, and all of a sudden their life starts to crumble, and they know there's a safe person that's available. Really, that's where I've been able to step into those places. And really, we've seen our staff grow from a staff of 3. I was the third person hired back in 2001 to have 24 guys across the country now doing the same thing, building relationships and ministering to the golf teams in their regions. And so that's what we get to do. We get to walk alongside them and again, remind them that golf score doesn't define who they are. There is a God out there who loves them unconditionally, not based on their performance. And really, it's the performance of Jesus that defines who they are, who, again, lived that perfect life that they couldn't live and died in their place and rose from the dead to offer that eternal life that we're all longing for. And so, yeah, I'm blessed to be able to get to do it.
That's it. Steve Burdick, this has been great. As we close here, let me ask you this question, which we ask to all of our guests here on the podcast. What are you learning today from God? What is he teaching you? You're pouring into a lot of guys now. You had your experiences and you're pouring into them, but what is God pouring into you right now? What are you learning from the Lord?
Probably the biggest thing is it's not about me. I think early on, I used to think it was about me. Like, if I would just be out there more and I just have more relationships, more opportunity, more time, and be traveling more, now as a father of 2 kids and my kids are middle school and high school, and realizing, what, I can't be everywhere. And really my ministry now has to be my family, and number one, and really investing in our younger staff now who we're sending out to go make disciples. And so really we're just trying to follow Jesus's lead of, hey, if we make disciples, who go make disciples, and that multiplies out. A lot of people in this world can get affected for the kingdom of God. And so again, if I can just humble myself and allow the Lord to do what the Lord is really good at doing, and that's making himself known and really pour into the people that God's entrusted to me so that they go and pour into others. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that I can make now.
Steve Burdick is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, the executive director of College Golf Fellowship. Steve, thanks for being here on the show. Let's catch up again sometime and keep doing the good work you're doing, my friend. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great stuff there from Steve Burdick, the executive director of College Golf Fellowship here on Sports Spectrum. He tells his story very well. And one of the takeaways I had from our conversation was that you have to be able to tell others about the hope that is within you. 1 Peter 3:15. It's right there in Scripture, says that. We have to be able to share our testimony and tell others about what Jesus has done in our lives. That's the beauty of this podcast. And Steve, to me, exemplifies that perfectly by being able to tell his story of faith, coming to the Lord when he was in high school, the challenges he faced, the temptations and the valleys, if you will, that came directly at him when he goes to Stanford after achieving and experiencing a ton of success, winning a national championship, and then suddenly not having the opportunity in his senior year to go defend his own title. And suddenly golf isn't in the picture anymore in a few years, but Steve's passion turns from golf to God. And he was able to find a way to intersect both of those with College Golf Fellowship and working in ministry. Check out the website, by the way, collegegolffellowship.com. collegegolffellowship.com. It's got some cool stuff there and just gives you a little more information about what that ministry is doing to help with professional and college golfers and encouraging them in their walk with the Lord. So thanks to Steve Burdick for being here on Sports Spectrum. We also want to thank you for listening. Check out our social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and like us there. Send us a note, maybe DM us, whatever you'd like to do to get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. You can also check out our YouTube channel. Lots of great video content there, including each podcast that we record and release out to all of you. So check out our YouTube page. And lastly, as I said in the beginning of this podcast, check out our website, sportsspectrum.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Have a great rest of your day. I am Jason Romano, and this is Sports Spectrum.